Hey everyone. All right, so in today's vlog, I want to talk about how sneaky that ego is. So what is the difference? I've spoken about the difference between ego and intuition, but to be completely honest, it takes a really long time, years and maybe even longer to really recognize that ego. So I'm going to give you an example, because the ego is so tricky, and I've said this in prior vlogs, how to distinguish from the ego and intuition. Now, before I have said intuition is very soft. It's very much so a feminine energy. It's healing. It just comes to you. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just kind of flows through you, right? It's your intuitive, it's energy that is within yourself that connects with like other energies beyond us, and it'll come to you in flow. Okay, so it's never a disruption, it's always just a flow. So often what will happen, and then I'll give you an example, is we get this intuition, but the ego is so tricky that the ego will make you believe that it's that intuition that you got from the get-go that started a feeling or a thought. So it always comes in a feeling, right? Like intuition is a feeling. You can't describe intuition any other way. So if intuition is spirit, then think of it that way. It's a feeling. But what happens is when you start putting thought to that feeling, right away, that's ego. Right away. I think that's a pretty good distinction, but I want to go a little bit further and just say, like, the ego is so smart, it wants to take over the spirit. So sometimes I'll call it the spirit ego, because it's like the devil, the ugly side of the ego. And what it will do is, as soon as you form thought to the feeling, that's going to be your ego. And the thought can often, be, it can come from fear. If it's not coming from love, it is absolutely your ego. So, okay, so here's an example. I was talking to a friend a couple days ago, and we were talking about boys, and she was talking about this like guy who she kind of is interested in, but then hasn't been interested in, and they haven't seen each other in a while, but he has been popping up in her mind's eye and popping up in her dreams. So she thought, like, so she was asking me, like, what the hell is this? How come he keeps popping up in my mind's eye and I can't get rid of him? Like, is there something else? Is this my intuition? Am I supposed to like make things work with this person? And my first question was, when you were with them, like, how did you feel? So it's really important. When I say I do a lot of regressional work on myself, the way I do it is I begin to look at my timeline, and you have to try and do this without, if you're angry at somebody, this is not going to work. You have to do this regressional work with absolute balance, and trust me, it is the hardest to do when you do it for yourself. That's why even like, it's easy for me to see what somebody else's future might look like, but it's very difficult for me to tap into my own. And it just is, because we have feelings and thoughts, and we're human beings, right? So when you do regressional work, it's really difficult. First of all, you have to kind of master, I don't like the word master, but you do have to have a very intelligent knowing of the differentiation of ego and intuition. So when I do my regressional work, I look at, okay, where did this start? How did it start? And what feelings did I have when it started? And then I go down the timeline and I look at my feelings without what the other person did, without thought. I look at the feelings. That's how I do my regressional work. So when and the feelings that aren't love, they're not, It's not intuition. So once my feelings that aren't of love on my timeline start to fade, then I start to analyze it from a human perspective, and I start to understand the ego more with both parties. And from there, I will see where this person was like a trigger for me. Was there learning lessons? Did I learn the lessons? And what will happen is if you don't thank that person, this is why surrender is so important. If you don't thank that person at that point in your timeline, you will begin to, if you're not surrendering it, you are starting to form a little bit of an attachment to it, possibly. Okay, if you're definitely resisting it, definitely. So what resistance does is resistance is ego. So anything that's not surrender and is resistance, you can think of it as ego. And anything you're resisting on that timeline, if you don't deal with the resistance through forgiveness, that resistance will start collecting in your subconscious mind. So that explains the dreams, right? Now, see how sneaky the ego is? So it will make you think like now you're dreaming of this person, like, oh my God, is this my intuition? Is this often dreams are just your subconscious mind playing out what is held in it. That's why I have a dream diary upstairs, and I've gotten really good over time to remember my dreams and to analyze my dreams, because I know I try and I work on my subconscious mind, right? So if you look at her story and the example I just gave of the timeline, now do you think that that's intuition, or do you think it's ego? It's ego. It's definitely ego. Ego is taking the form, that's why I call it the spirit ego, which is actually to me like the devil, and it's taking the form of, you need to explore this more. And sometimes this also happens because the other person is thinking of you too. So when the other person is thinking you can think of it like we're all in this like web of this world together. But if two spiders were to form a web, like one connecting with the other, it's going to intermingle, right? Like it just is going to. So you can think of it, even though there's distance between that person and you, but if they're thinking about you, that's energy. So then that also could be tapping, because your subconscious mind picks up on energy. We are a body of energy, so that you'll tap into that. It's not doing you any favors, but the ego loves that, because the ego can feed off of that. So that is your spirit ego trying to give you thoughts of this is more than what it is, because the ego loves to keep you in fear. It wants to keep you vibrating low. It doesn't want you to tap into your true intuition. So that was my answer to her. Like, this is actually your ego. You need to do more regressional work. There's some resistance happening. Where is the resistance happening? Give it understanding. Look at what you needed to learn from it. Everything here is given to us, good or bad, as a learning lesson. And then take the power back. Take a pen and pencil, write, and give it forgiveness, because the forgiveness and surrender are key. Forgiveness and surrender are key to freedom and enlightenment. Key. What forgiveness does is it allows you to go back and look at things from a child's point of view. And enlightenment is when you look at everything like a child. When you look at everything with innocence, that's what enlightenment is. So anyways, I'm going to do more vlogs like this, because this damn ego, the way I've learned it, like, now I know when the ego starts kicking in, because the ego now is holding on to my intuition, and the ego kicks in. I just had it kick in yesterday and I knew it was ego. So now it's like oil and water. It's kind of like how Aaron Abke says it. It's oil and water. Like, now I can recognize the ego. And my biggest way to recognize the ego and intuition is always a feeling. But the moment I form thought to that feeling, I know it's ego. So that's how I recognize it right away. It's very hard to do, takes practice, but it's so awesome when you can do that. Your spirit just like expands and grows more. I hope that helps. Love you guys.